Reading I will share with you this morning is a reading I have shared with just about every congregation I've been privileged to minister to since I first got it in 1996. Because to me it expresses the essence of Thanksgiving. It goes back to, since it was written in 96, it goes back to a movie and a novel that were current at that time, and a river runs through it. You may have seen the novel. You may have seen the movie or read the novel. It starts with a quote from Wendell Berry. This is by a woman named Susan Hall, who was a UCC minister in Charleston, mentored me through the decision to go to divinity school. The Wendell Berry quote that begins is, "We are what we are given, and what is taken away." Norman McLean wades into the swift silver of Big Blackfoot River, casting for memories with the same reverence he reserves for trout. Planting his feet in the slowly deepening riverbed, Norman begins to hear the long story of his life cascading by, from his birth in Missoula, Montana, where the riverbanks were the breasts on which he fed as a child, through a restive adolescent initiation in the roaring rapids, the still reflections of his first love, to the dark eddies of gambling and debt that pulled his brother under. Now all are gone home before him in that great race to the sea. Eventually, Norman concludes, from the timeless sibilant prayer of water on rock, eventually all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. There is a river that runs through us. It is mystery. It is life. Some say God. It descends through my granite soul with the force of gravity and love, plunges through empty canyons, chisels out corridors with its wet hands, and slowly, ever so, widens the cracks and crevices of my failures into pools where grace collects. The injury of the river is also its gift. Where I have been cut deeply, so there life most deeply, most surely flows. I don't believe that the gifts of God come in the form of goodness, but in the face of life itself, in danger's shadow as well as dazzling light, in a disquieted heart as often as a still mind, in labor as in love. If we would receive the sacred, we must receive the river's flow, even as it injures, even as it takes away. I thank God for my handicap, said Helen Keller, unable to hear a bubbling stream or see its glistening green or put it into praise. Yet she praises. I thank God for my handicaps, for through them I have found myself, my work, my God. That, to me, is Thanksgiving. It's not about being glad for the good things that have happened to us. They are simply moments in the sun. Thanksgiving is standing still with an injured and an open heart and letting the river run freely through us. Each year at this time I stop and cast into the water. I recount the story of the year past, of life given and taken away, our planet's staggering losses, our moments of forgiveness, our fulgent gains. I think of a friend's child who came swimming into this world on amniotic rivers, and I remember my grandmother's final crossing over to the other shore. I remember the intense hope of eyes brimming with the vows of marriage, and the loosening tears of those whose hope was broken. I think of my own love found, or friends lost. We are what we are given, and what is taken away. Blessed by the name of the giver and taker. The confluence of all things returns to the sea, the source. The gift unites with the giver. Let the river run. The banks of my heart are wide with thanks. Come, ye thankful people. What are we thankful for? And to what or whom are we thankful? Cartoonist Mike Lukovich of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution posted a drawing a few days ago which shows the Pilgrims and the Native Americans sitting down to the feast. One of the Native Americans is saying, "Chief signing executive order to let you stay in country." Let that sink in a little bit. That kind of satire points up our situation in Thanksgiving 2014. We have the history of a day of Thanksgiving in memory of a feast memorialized in Mr. Winthrop's letter, and we use it to count our blessings. But we cannot escape the perspective that what was a blessing for the settlers was a curse for the Wampanoags. The survival skill taught by the Wampanoags enabled the settlers to make it through the winter. And yet that very survival of the English was to change the natives' way of life and to start them on the road to losing their country altogether. If we could go back and advise Massasoit with the benefit of hindsight, would we tell him that he was ensuring that his people would be squeezed off the land? Would we advise him to slaughter the English quickly and quietly while he had the chance, and do the same with any more that came ashore to discourage settlement by any means necessary? Maybe we would. But some of us are direct descendants of those first colonists, and all of us partake of the culture that those English settlers established. A few years ago, I, like most of Chatham, read Nathaniel Philbrick's Mayflower, and I came away from that book thinking that if the natives had had the organization and the will in 1620 that they had 50 years later in King Philip's War, they might have saved New England from European settlement altogether. But maybe not. Let's remember the events that had led up to that first Thanksgiving feast. The Mayflower had moved from Provincetown to Plymouth Harbor in the fall of 1620. But the Pilgrims didn't go ashore much that first winter. They suffered from exposure, scurvy, and contagious diseases, and only half of the original voyagers lived to see the spring. In March, the remaining settlers moved ashore, and one day they were astonished to find themselves greeted in English by an Abenaki Indian named Samoset. He stayed with them for 2 days and then left, returning a few days later with Tisquantum, also known as Squanto, a member of the Pawtuxet tribe who was fluent in English. Squanto was fluent in English because he had been captured by an English sea captain several years before and sold into slavery in England, but had escaped and returned to Massachusetts on an exploratory expedition. When he finally returned to his native village near present-day Plymouth, he found most of the population had died of diseases, probably as a result of European contact. Squanto was a godsend for the settlers. He taught them how to grow corn, how to avoid poisonous plants, how to get maple sap from trees, and how to fish in the rivers. The settlers were on the verge of starvation, and they owed their survival to Squanto. He served as interpreter for the colonists for 2 years, and he ultimately died here in Chatham. Squanto also negotiated a peace treaty between the English settlers and Massasoit, the sachem or chief of the Wampanoags. Massasoit was eager to make peace with the settlers, for about 80% of the Wampanoags had died a few years earlier in an outbreak of smallpox, and Massasoit feared that they would be taken over by the Narragansetts. So Massasoit didn't sign an executive order, but he did accept the settlers for his own military/political reasons. The point is that while the thankfulness of the settlers may have been fulsome indeed, our own today is tinged with sadness for the sufferings that the settlers soon inflicted on the natives. This brings us down to today. Susan Hall writes, "The injury of the river is also its gift." We're not just thankful for the good things in life. If we're spiritually mature, we're thankful for it all. For the bad and the good are two sides of the one coin, life. Yesterday I attended Dick Noble's memorial service in the other church he belonged to and the church I used to serve, First Church Belmont. It was a beautiful service, but entering that building stirred up a wealth of emotions for me, some of them positive and some of them less so. But I was thankful that I had come, and I was reminded of the grace that is recited at that church every Sunday when the chalice is lit, authored by another former minister. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Life is the gift. It is the reason for our gratitude, and it includes the sunny side as well as the shadow side. Let me tell you of another experience I had this week, which is high on the list of things for which I am grateful. Thursday night, my jug band bandmate, Bud Brown, and I took a little road trip to Woods Hole. They have a little training program there for aspiring public radio producers. And one of the students in the program, named Mary Quintus, had put together a little 6-minute audio piece on Bud, and more particularly on Bud's relation to the song he often sings in performances, "Let the Mystery Be." The song was written by Iris DeMint. It's an engaging speculation on what happens to us after we die. We only got notice on Thursday at noon that the Bud project with the other student projects was going to be played in a public audio performance in Woods Hole. I jumped on the chance to see Bud get his 15 minutes of fame, and it didn't take much convincing to get him to go to Woods Hole if I did the driving. On the way down, he was telling me how his wife, Pat, as she was dying in 2006, requested that he sing "Let the Mystery Be" at her memorial service, and how grateful he was to Dennis Meacham for driving all the way to Cambridge to accompany him at that event. I was deeply moved, and I said to him, "Bud, now I see why this producer made her radio piece about this song. I'm sure she'll make that performance at Pat's memorial service the center of her story." Well, the community center in Woods Hole was packed, and we listened to some fascinating radio stories from other student producers on such Cape Cod topics as coyotes, roller derbies, and the community of Jesus in Orleans. And each student took questions from the audience after their segment has been played. Finally, we got to Mary Quintus's piece. It featured one version of the song performed with full jug band backup, which then segued into Iris DeMint singing it, and another version which Bud had done for her a cappella, which was even more moving. In the radio segment, Bud not only told the story of his wife's memorial service, which he had related to me on the drive down, but also said that he had sung it by request at 2 other memorial services, one for bandmate Phil Thompson and the other for John Randall's stepson. After the segment had finished playing, Mary Quintus stood up to take questions, but first she said, "And I want to say that Bud is with us here tonight." At that, the audience began a sustained applause, and I dug my elbow into Bud's ribs until he got up and acknowledged it. It was probably more applause than he's ever gotten for a musical performance. It made the whole trip worthwhile. Now you may be asking, what has this to do with Thanksgiving? Just this. The deep resonance of the story of Bud's association with this song does not come just from the beauty of the song, or the skill with which he renders it, though that is considerable. It comes from the context, that it is a song that gets people through an experience of loss. Everybody's wondering how and where we all come from. Everybody's worrying about where we're going to go when the whole thing's done. But no one knows for certain, so it's all the same to me. I'll just let the mystery be. It's a beautiful sentiment of agnosticism. We lose loved ones to this thing called death, And we don't know what happens to them. And we can worry about that, or we can choose to let the mystery be. Come, ye thankful people, come. The entry of the river is also its gift. The gifts which are most precious, which are in our deepest expression of thanks, are those which speak to our losses as well as our gains. Bud's song does this. And speaking of agnosticism, my atheist friend and former client, Herb Silverman, just published a little useful piece of advice for atheists at Thanksgiving dinner. If you should find yourself surrounded by family piety before the turkey is served, Herb suggests that you keep these things in mind. 1, don't come out as an atheist before the meal. 2, be yourself during the meal. 3, sit respectfully while others give thanks to God. 4, if you're asked to say the blessing, do it. 5, turn the blessing into a family affair. 6, keep ready the Bible, verse from 1 Corinthians, which says, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. 7, if you're not ready to come out as an atheist, don't do it. These seem like good common sense prescriptions for keeping a measure of family harmony. You may have wondered what Herb meant by number 4. If you're asked to say the blessing, do it. Here's how he elaborates. I think it presents a wonderful opportunity to give thanks to the farmers who grew the food, the migrant workers who harvested them, the truck drivers who brought the food, the grocery store employees who displayed it, and the family and friends who helped prepare it. No need to mention any gods. Come, ye thankful people, come. We can be grateful in the face of sorrow. We can be grateful without agreeing on who or what it is that we are grateful to. A few minutes ago, we read Dick Fuchs's great Thanksgiving reading, which begins, for the sun and moon and dawn, which we did not create. I hear in Dick's prose here some resonance with the speech Moses gives as one of his farewell songs to the Israelites in the 6th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. When the Lord your God has brought you into the land that he swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you, a land with fine large cities that you did not build, houses filled with all sorts of goods that you did not fill, hewn cisterns that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. And when you have eaten your fill, take care that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. God is here about to give the Israelites the land of Canaan, which we may see today as an unjust act of colonial usurpation. Yet Moses enjoins the Israelites not to forget that these blessings flow from God. The blessings are not earned, and in fact were wrested from the original inhabitants. Does this sound familiar? Yes, it takes us back to the Pilgrims and the Wampanoags. Thanksgiving for the blessings of this life can live in our hearts alongside a healthy dose of sorrow for the sufferings of any peoples and a resolution to do what we can to end suffering. In terms of the Wampanoags, we can celebrate the resurrection of that dead language and the establishment of an immersion school in Mashpee as one step to keep alive a vibrant Indian culture within Anglo-America. The injury of the river is also its gift. Life does not come to us as unalloyed joy. It is all mixed with loss and pain. I was overjoyed last week that a family in this church escaped serious injury in an auto accident. But in that same location an hour later, another accident occurred which took the life of a person. We open our hearts to all that life brings and let the river flow through us. That is Thanksgiving. Come, ye thankful people. Come. Amen.